ever get that feeling? When your phone seems to be running in slow motion, maybe right about the time a shiny new model hits the shelves.
Or your printer suddenly decides it's done, even though you know there's ink in there.
Exactly. It's incredibly frustrating. And that's what we're digging into today. Planned obsolescence. Specifically in our consumer electronics. Smartphones, laptops, printers, all that stuff we use every day.
Yeah, and the key thing, based on the sources we looked at, is that it's often not just things wearing out naturally. It seems to be, a deliberate strategy.
A strategy?
Yeah, manufacturers intentionally limiting how long products work or maybe how desirable they seem to get us to buy new ones more often.
Okay, so for this deep dive, we've really gone through quite a bit. Industry analyses, articles, looking at the history, even some of the legal stuff popping up.
Right. And our mission here today, for you listening, is to unpack all of that.
We want you to understand the different ways this works, why companies do it, what the actual impact is, and importantly, what's being done about it.
Think of it as your shortcut to getting really informed on this whole planned obsolescence thing.
So let's start with the basics. What is planned obsolescence, especially when we talk about our gadgets?
Well, like we said, the core idea our sources point to is intentionally limiting a product's useful life. The goal, to drive repeat purchases.
And that word intentionality seems really important here, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's what separates this from just, a device getting old and naturally wearing out, or technology genuinely moving forward. This is about specific design choices to shorten that lifespan.
And looking at the history you mentioned, this isn't exactly a new trick, right? It didn't start with smartphones.
Not at all. It goes way back. Our sources highlighted some really fascinating early examples.
Like what?
Well, there was the Phoebus cartel back in 1924. Get this. Major light bulb makers actually got together and agreed to reduce how long their bulbs lasted.
Reduce them? Why would they do that?
To sell more bulbs. They could have made them last maybe 2,500 hours, but they standardized them to around 1,000, maybe 1,200 hours, and apparently sales jumped by about 25%.
Wow. A light bulb cartel deliberately making things worse for consumers just to boost sales.
Yeah.
That's something. So, okay, light bulbs. What came next? Did cars suddenly start breaking down faster?
Not exactly breaking down faster, but something else happened with cars around the same time, mid-1920s. Alfred P. Sloan Jr. at General Motors. He brought in this idea called dynamic obsolescence.
Dynamic obsolescence. What's that?
Instead of making the car physically fail, GM started introducing annual style changes. New looks, different features, minor tweaks.
So it wasn't about the engine dying.
Nope. It was about making your perfectly good older model seem outdated, making you want the newest style. It shortened how long people kept their cars, purely based on perception.
Clever in a way. Creating desire, not just responding to need. And the actual term planned obsolescence, when did that surface?
That popped up around 1932 during the Great Depression. There was this guy, Bernard London, who actually proposed legally mandating obsolescence.
Mandating it, like forcing products to expire.
Yeah. His idea, pretty controversial, was that forcing people to buy new stuff would stimulate the economy, create jobs. A bit drastic, maybe.
Definitely sounds drastic. So we've got light bulbs, cars. How did this thinking evolve towards our modern gadgets?
Well, a big moment was in 1960 with Vance Packard's book, The Waste Makers. He really brought the concept into the public eye, framing it as, a questionable, maybe unethical business practice.
So he called out manufacturers for deliberately designing things not to last.
Pretty much. He highlighted how this was becoming more common. So you see, this idea of managing product life for profit has been around a long, long time before our smartphones even existed.
Which brings us to today. Why are consumer electronics, our gadgets, such prime candidates for these kinds of strategies?
Good question. Several reasons make electronics particularly susceptible. First, the pace of tech advancement is just so fast, right? Think Moore's Law, constant new features, better performance.
You're already kind of primed to want the next best thing.
Exactly. And second, these devices are complex. Compared to a light bulb, there are just so many more subtle ways to encourage an upgrade. Software, batteries, components. Lots of levers to pull.
Okay, so we get the what and the why it applies to tech. Let's get into the how. What are the specific strategies manufacturers use with our phones, laptops, printers?
Right, let's break down the taxonomy our sources describe. The first category is contrived durability.
Contrived durability? That sounds like designing something not to last.
That's basically it. It involves choices made before the product even hits the market design choices. Material choices that intentionally shorten its physical lifespan. It's not just normal wear. It's engineered failure, you could say.
Can you give some examples of what that looks like in practice?
Sure. Think about using, say, softer metal screws that strip easily, or putting brittle plastic gears in areas that take a lot of stress, little things that are likely to break sooner than they needed to.
Okay, weak points built in.
Exactly. And then there are the batteries. This is a big one. Smartphones, laptops, earbuds, even electric toothbrushes, often designed with batteries that degrade significantly after just 2 or 3 years, or a set number of charge cycles.
And they're often really hard to replace, right?
Precisely. Glued in, sealed casings makes it very difficult for the average person. Apple and Samsung have definitely faced criticism around this. It's not just that batteries wear out, it feels like they're often designed to be the point of failure that pushes you towards a new device.
Yeah, that battery issue is a huge frustration. Your phone works fine otherwise, but the battery life just tanks.
Well, there have been issues reported with certain Samsung AMOLED displays. For instance, problems with ribbon cables or internal layers degrading, sometimes apparently accelerated by software updates. These tiny connections failing can mess up your whole screen.
Okay, so specific parts prone to failure.
Right. And also components where the repair cost is deliberately high. Think printer print heads or washing machine drum bearings or fridge compressors. They design them so if that specific part fails, often just after the warranty runs out, the repair cost is so high you think, might as well just buy a new one.
It really feels like stacking the deck against keeping things long term. What's the next tactic?
The next major strategy is prevention of repairs. This isn't about making the product fail faster, but about making it incredibly difficult, costly, or just impossible to fix when it does break.
How do they actively block repairs? Seems like they'd want the repair business.
You'd think so, but often the money is in selling new units. So they use things like proprietary fasteners. Apple's pentalobe screws are the classic example. You need special tools most people don't have.
Right, I've heard of those.
Then there's inaccessible design. Sealed casings, components glued down, parts welded together, makes it risky and hard just to open the device without causing more damage. Think cheap digital watches, basically impossible to fix.
Oh, physically hard to get into. What else?
Restricting access to spare parts is a big one. They might stop making parts for older models or only sell them to their authorized repair network or price them ridiculously high.
So even if you could fix it, you can't get the part, or it costs more than a new device.
Exactly. Think about expensive Canon or HP printheads, or trying to find a tiny plastic latch for an older Bosch blender. Increasingly, we're seeing software locks or parts pairing.
Parts pairing? What's that?
It means the device's software checks if a replacement part has an authorized serial number. If you use a third-party part, even if it's perfectly compatible, the software might refuse to let it work properly.
Wow. So they lock you into their own parts and repairs using software.
Essentially, yes. And don't forget those non-replaceable batteries again, they fit here too, as a major barrier to repair and longevity.
It really does feel like they're building disposable machines sometimes. Okay, what's strategy number 3?
That would be systemic obsolescence. Here, the product itself might still work fine physically, but it becomes obsolete because the larger system, it depends on changes. It becomes incompatible.
So the world moves on and your gadget gets left behind even if it's not broken.
Precisely. Think software and OS incompatibility. New operating system versions or updates come out, and suddenly your older phone or tablet slows to a crawl. It can barely run the apps you need.
Yeah, I think everyone's experienced that. Apple got into hot water for slowing down older iPhones with updates, didn't they?
They did. That's a prime example. Then there's the discontinuation of support. Manufacturers stop providing software updates for older devices or operating systems.
Which leaves them vulnerable to security risks, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Or maybe updated apps just won't install anymore. Remember when WhatsApp stopped working on older BlackBerry phones? That's systemic obsolescence in action.
Okay. What else falls under this?
Changes in hardware standards. Old ports get phased out, think USB-A giving way to USB-C. Or frequent changes in proprietary connectors, like Apple's shifts over the years. Lack of backward compatibility is another one. New game consoles not playing old games or using old controllers.
Right. Your old stuff just doesn't work with the new ecosystem.
And finally, just discontinuing services like maintenance support or even the availability of spare parts we mentioned earlier that also contributes to making older devices systemically obsolete.
It's like forced retirement for your tech. Okay, strategy number 4.
Next up is programmed obsolescence. This is probably the most, sinister sounding one. It's where there's a built-in mechanism designed to deliberately disable the product or degrade its performance after a certain time or a certain number of uses or when some condition is met.
So like a hidden kill switch or something, often controlled by software.
Yeah, often software or embedded chips. Think about ink cartridges with chips that stop them working after X number of pages are printed, or after a certain date, even if there's still ink left.
The dreaded ink cartridge issue. HP faced lawsuits over that, didn't they? Allegations of hidden expiration dates?
They did. It's a classic example. We also see component failure timers. A printer drum might be programmed to report itself as failed after so many thousands of pages, even if it's still perfectly capable of printing.
So the chip says it's dead, even if the part isn't.
Exactly. Samsung laser printers have been cited for this with imaging drums, and some Canon Pixma printers reportedly disable the scanner function if the ink runs out, even though scanning uses no ink.
That seems particularly egregious.
It does feel that way. And we should bring up software-induced slowdowns again here, emphasizing the program aspect updates designed specifically to degrade older hardware performance. Software lockouts, too, making apps like YouTube incompatible with older OS versions, even if the hardware could technically handle it.
And you mentioned dated obsolescence. Like things just stopping on a certain date.
Yeah, or maybe battery lifespan being sharply limited by a time window rather than just usage cycles. It's about building in that predetermined end-of-life point.
It's pretty unsettling. Okay, one more main strategy, right?
Yeah.
The one that plays on our psychology.
Exactly. The last one is perceived obsolescence. This is all about manipulating how we feel about our perfectly functional products, making them seem outdated, undesirable, even if they work just fine. It's less about the tech failing and more about making us want to replace it.
So this is the marketing and style angle, making us feel like we need the new shiny thing.
Precisely. Frequent style and design changes are key. New phone colors, remember rose gold. Minor design tweaks heavily marketed as the latest and greatest. It's common in smartphones, fashion, cars.
Creating that itch for novelty.
Right. And marketing and advertising play a huge role, obviously, emphasizing status, newness, creating that fear of missing out, FOMO, making your current device feel instantly old.
Even if the actual improvements are tiny?
Especially then. Promoting minor feature upgrades as if they're revolutionary breakthroughs. Think about those annual iPhone launches or other brands releasing very similar models frequently. The camera is slightly better, the processor is marginally faster, enough to make you feel yours is lagging behind.
So my phone isn't bad. It just doesn't have that one new feature, and suddenly it feels inadequate.
That's the core of perceived obsolescence. And remember, these categories aren't always neat boxes. Manufacturers often layer these strategies.
Like a new design to make it look fresh, software updates that slow down the old one, and it's hard to repair.
Exactly, a multi-pronged approach. And it's important, as you dig into this, to distinguish this planned stuff, deliberate commercial choices from, say, a component becoming obsolete because demand genuinely dries up, or a truly groundbreaking innovation making older tech functionally inferior.
That distinction is key. Okay, this gives us a clear picture of the how, but why? What's the core calculation for manufacturers? Why go down this road?
Fundamentally, it boils down to the economic rationale. The main driver, according to our sources, is sustained revenue and maximizing profit. Simple as that.
By making us buy things more often.
Right. Shorten that replacement cycle, keep the sales rolling in. It works particularly well in markets with just a few big players, oligopolies, where there's strong brand loyalty, less risk of customers jumping ship to a competitor promising durability.
And that information gap we talked about.
That's huge. Information asymmetry. Manufacturers know way more about how long their products are really likely to last and where the weak points are than we consumers do. They can exploit that.
Makes sense. And as markets mature, like smartphones now, is that when perceived obsolescence becomes more important?
Definitely. When the big technological leaps slow down, making things seem old becomes a key way to stimulate demand. It's just like GM shifting to style changes when the car market got saturated back in the day.
So it's mostly about the bottom line. But manufacturers must have justifications, right? What are the arguments they sometimes make?
Oh, they do. There's definitely a debate here. One common argument is that this constant cycle drives innovation.
The idea being that pressure to release new models pushes R&D.
Yeah, that it leads to better products over time. The rapid evolution of smartphones is often used as an example. They also argue it fuels economic growth and creates jobs, continuous demand, keeps factories running, supports employment. Echoes of Bernard London's idea, really.
Okay, innovation and jobs. What else?
Cost control. They might say using cheaper, possibly shorter lifespan components allows them to sell the product at a lower initial price point, making it more accessible.
So a trade-off between upfront cost and longevity.
That's the argument. They also talk about value engineering or necessary engineering trade-offs, suggesting it's inefficient to overbuild something to last way longer than its expected useful life, which might be limited by tech advancements anyway. Or designing components to fail around the same time to avoid waste.
Designing them to fail together.
Yeah. And finally, some argue it's just a natural outcome of market forces and competition. Companies have to keep innovating and releasing new stuff frequently just to keep up and meet perceived consumer demand, which naturally leads to shorter cycles, regardless of intent to make things fail.
But as we kind of touched on, some of those arguments feel a bit thin when you look at tactics like preventing repair or just changing the color, right?
Exactly. The innovation justification seems less convincing when the obsolescence comes from blocking repairs or making purely cosmetic changes. It really points back to profit, driven by that shorter replacement cycle, often being the primary motive.
Okay, understood. So we know the strategies, we know the likely motivations. What are the actual consequences of designing things this way? What's the impact?
The consequences are pretty significant, hitting us on multiple levels. First, there's the consumer cost.
It means just having to buy stuff more often.
That's a big part of it. The financial burden of frequent replacements. Plus, high repair costs when repairs are blocked or made deliberately expensive. It can really add up. Some estimates suggest tens of thousands of euros over a lifetime for a typical consumer.
Wow, that's substantial. And it's frustrating too, isn't it?
Hugely. Unexpected breakdowns, difficulty getting things fixed, feeling pressured to upgrade when your current device is basically fine. It leads to real dissatisfaction. It also warps our perception of value. Marketing constantly tells us older stuff is worthless, fostering this disposable culture.
And consumer rights.
Yeah, that's impacted too. Closed ecosystems, preventing repairs that undermines our choice. Lack of transparency about lifespan infringes our right to be informed. And what good is a warranty if the product is kind of designed to fail shortly after it expires?
So real costs, frustration, erosion of rights for us. What about the bigger picture, the environmental side?
Oh, the environmental footprint is massive. This is a huge driver of the global e-waste crisis.
Because we're throwing away gadgets more quickly.
Exactly. The sheer volume of electronic waste is staggering. We hit a record 62 million tons globally in 2022, and is projected to exceed 82 million by 2030. It's growing much faster than our ability to recycle it.
And how much actually gets recycled?
Very little. Estimates are usually around 17% to 22%. Think about that. Billions of smartphones just becoming e-waste. And that means an accelerated drain on natural resources.
Because we need new materials for every new device.
Right. Billions of dollars worth of recoverable metals like gold and copper are just lost in that waste stream. We have to constantly extract virgin resources, including rare earth elements and sometimes conflict minerals, which has its own set of environmental and social problems.
And the disposal itself is harmful, isn't it?
Absolutely. E-waste contains toxic substances lead, mercury, cadmium. When it ends up in landfills or informal dump sites, especially in developing countries, those toxins can leach into soil and water, contaminating ecosystems and posing serious health risks. E-waste is actually responsible for about 70% of the toxic waste produced globally.
70%. That's shocking.
It is. Plus, incineration releases harmful emissions, and the whole life cycle, extraction, manufacturing, transport, disposal, it all has a large carbon footprint due to the energy required.
It paints a pretty bleak picture environmentally. Are there ethical lines being crossed too?
Definitely. There are significant ethical fault lines, the potential for deception, intentionally designing failure or obsolescence without being upfront about it, that erodes consumer trust by exploiting that information gap we talked about.
And for the people designing these products.
There can be real ethical dilemmas for engineers. Their professional codes often emphasize public welfare and honesty, but they might face pressure from management to prioritize profit over durability.
A difficult position to be in.
For sure. And it raises broader questions about corporate social responsibility. Is it ethical to prioritize short-term profits so heavily when it comes at such a high environmental and social cost? Where does corporate accountability lie?
It really feels like a system that benefits manufacturers in the short term, but costs consumers and the planet dearly in the long run. So, is anything changing? Is there pushback? Are there solutions emerging?
Thankfully, yes. There's definitely a growing countercurrent. One of the biggest forces is the right to repair movement.
Right, I've been hearing more about that. What's the core idea?
It's advocating for laws that guarantee consumers and independent repair shops the right to fix products. That means ensuring access to necessary spare parts, repair manuals, diagnostic tools, and software, all on fair and reasonable terms.
So directly tackling that prevention of repairs strategy.
Exactly. The aim is to make repairs feasible and affordable, which extends product lifespans, reduces the need for constant replacements, saves consumers money, and cuts down on that mountain of e-waste.
And is it gaining traction legally?
It really is. In the U.S., as of early 2025, all 50 states had actually introduced right-to-repair bills. Several states have already passed laws. New York, California, Minnesota, Colorado, Oregon have laws covering various electronics and appliances, some even tackling things like parts pairing.
So state-level action is happening. What about federally or internationally?
Massachusetts was an early pioneer with auto repair back in 2012. President Biden issued an executive order in 2021 encouraging the FTC to take action. And the EU adopted a significant right-to-repair directive in May 2024, building on existing rules about parts availability for some appliances.
That sounds promising. Is there pushback from manufacturers?
Oh, absolutely. Industry groups often raise concerns about safety risks from improper repairs, cybersecurity vulnerabilities, protecting their intellectual property, and arguing that modern devices are just too complex for anyone but authorized technicians. The laws often end up with exemptions or loopholes too, so it's still an ongoing battle.
Okay, so right to repair is one big push. Are there other regulatory efforts directly targeting planned obsolescence itself?
Yes, regulators are starting to look beyond just repair. That EU directive we just mentioned, 2020/825, which is part of their Green Deal, actually prohibits unfair commercial practices linked to early obsolescence.
Like what specifically?
It bans marketing goods with known flaws designed to limit lifespan, like software deliberately slowing things down or hardware designed to fail early. It requires companies to tell you if an update will negatively impact your device, say the battery. It prohibits presenting functional updates as necessary when they aren't.
So trying to stop some of those specific tactics we discussed.
Exactly. It also bans misleading claims about durability or repairability unless backed by guarantees, discourages telling people to replace consumables like ink cartridges before needed, and even bans falsely claiming third-party parts will harm the product. It tackles greenwashing too. Member states have until early 2026 to put it into national law, with enforcement starting later that year.
That sounds quite comprehensive. Any other places taking strong action?
France is notable. They made planned obsolescence a criminal offense back in 2015, with potential fines and even imprisonment, though proving intent was initially hard. They also mandate repairability index scores on many products, which helps consumers.
A repairability score right on the box? That's useful.
It is. And Quebec and Canada passed Bill 29, which explicitly bans making or selling goods with planned obsolescence, defined as reducing the normal operating life. It also brings in stronger warranties for electronics and bolsters right-to-repair rules significantly, including requirements for parts availability and use of common tools. Penalties there can be quite steep, too.
So the legal tide seems to be turning. Slowly, perhaps, but turning. What about businesses themselves? Are any companies changing their approach?
Yes, definitely. We're seeing shifts in business models. There's growing interest in the circular economy, moving away from that linear take, make, dispose model towards reducing waste, reusing products, making repair and refurbishment central, and finally recycling materials effectively. It means designing products from the start for longevity, repairability, and eventual disassembly.
And does that translate into specific design approaches?
Modular design is one key aspect. Designing products like phones or laptops with distinct modules, screen, battery, camera, that can be easily swapped out or upgraded by the user. This makes repairs simpler and allows for upgrades without replacing the entire device.
Is anyone actually doing that successfully?
Fairphone is probably the best-known example. Their whole business model is built around modularity, repairability. They sell spare parts directly, ethical material sourcing, transparency, and providing long-term software support. Their phones tend to last users longer.
Are there downsides to that model?
Well, some potential challenges include maybe slightly bulkier designs or not always having the absolute cutting-edge performance compared to sealed units. Supply chain complexity can be higher, and so far it remains a relatively niche market compared to the giants. But it shows it's possible.
Interesting. Any other alternative business models?
Servitization, or product as a service, is another one gaining traction. Instead of selling you, say, a printer, a company sells you a printing service, a guaranteed number of pages, or uptime.
So the company keeps ownership of the machine.
Exactly. They own the asset, so they are responsible for maintenance, repairs, upgrades, and eventual disposal. This completely changes their incentive structure. Suddenly, it's in their best interest to make the machine as durable, reliable, and easy to maintain as possible because breakdowns cost them money.
That makes a lot of sense. A different way of thinking about ownership and service.
It is. It requires significant operational changes for businesses and relies heavily on things like IoT for monitoring, but it aligns incentives towards longevity.
Okay, so we have legislation, regulation, and some innovative business models emerging. What about us? What power do we have as consumers?
Consumer empowerment is absolutely critical here. It starts with informed purchasing. Before you buy, do a bit of research. Look into durability reviews, check repairability scores. Sites like iFixit are great for this. Ask yourself if you really need the latest model. Consider supporting brands that prioritize sustainability and repair. And don't overlook used or refurbished options.
So being smarter shoppers, what about the gadgets we already own?
Focus on extending their lifespan. Manage your software carefully. Maybe don't jump on every single OS update immediately, especially on older devices, unless it's crucial for security. Take care of the hardware. Clean vents, manage battery health properly, avoid extreme temperatures, use good chargers, maybe aim for that 20-80% charge range, protect it from drops, manage storage space. Just careful handling and maintenance can make a big difference.
Good habits, basically, and if something does break.
Embrace repair. Before tossing it, see if it can be fixed. There are tons of online guides, iFixit Again, Repair FAQ, countless YouTube tutorials. Look for independent repair shops in your area or check the manufacturer's repair services. If you're feeling adventurous, consider DIY repair. The tools are often not that expensive. And look for community repair events like repair cafes.
Getting things fixed instead of automatically replacing them.
Exactly. And use your voice for advocacy and awareness. Let lawmakers know you support right to repair legislation. Give feedback to manufacturers, tell them you want products that last and can be fixed. Talk about this issue with friends and family. Participate in reporting schemes if they exist in your area, where you can report products that failed too soon.
Making our preferences known. And finally, when a device really is beyond repair.
Responsible disposal is key. Don't just bin it. Use proper e-waste collection points or services. See if the manufacturer has a take-back program. And always make sure you wipe your personal data securely before recycling.
So it really is a combination of things, laws changing, businesses innovating, and us making more conscious choices.
Precisely. Planned obsolescence is this complex web with deep historical roots and strong economic drivers, but the pushback is real and growing on all these fronts: legislative, business, and consumer action. It's not insurmountable.
Well, this has been incredibly illuminating. It's clear that this isn't just about our gadgets slowing down. It's a systemic issue with profound economic, environmental, and ethical consequences.
Absolutely. But what's also clear from the sources is that momentum is building against it. Through laws demanding repairability and transparency, businesses exploring circular models, and consumers becoming more aware and demanding change.
So maybe a final thought for you listening. As we navigate this landscape of rapidly evolving technology, how will the choices we make, what we buy, how long we keep it, whether we repair it, and the policies we support ultimately shape the future? Not just the lifespan of our gadgets, but our whole relationship with technology and its impact on our world.
It's definitely about seeking that better balance, isn't it? Between innovation, our needs as consumers, and the health of the planet. It's something we all need to think about.
Indeed. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive. Really appreciate you walking us through all of that.
My pleasure. It's a crucial topic.
Until our next one,
Yeah.
take care.